Good to see you. Thanks for coming to the gallery this evening virtually, the Cerulean Arts Gallery studio in Philadelphia, to tonight's tour and talk with the current collective exhibition. It features the work of Alysa Bennett, Susan D'Alessio, Sherman Hayman, Liz Price, and Louise Vanuezes. So we're going to tour the gallery, and each artist will speak about a little bit about themselves, about their work. We are recording this, so if you want to see it again, you'll be able to see it on our YouTube channel, or if someone you know wasn't able to be here, they can watch it there. And I'd ask that you please stay muted except for the artists who are speaking, because even if it doesn't sound like it, we pick up background noise. And if you have questions as we go, you can put them in the chat and I'll field them to the artist. Now you can come and see the show in person. It's up through March 6th. Our hours are Wednesday through Friday, 10 to 6, Saturday, Sunday, noon to 6. And everything is also available on our website. So I'll put a link to the site in the chat right now, so you can check things out there too. So what I'm going to do is spotlight Tina's video, and I'm going to spotlight Mer's video because we're going to visit her gallery first. Just take us a minute to hove into view there. Hi, Mer.
Hi, Mike. Sorry to throw things off.
That's okay. So if you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and the work in this show.
Oh, let me see. Oh, I was born in Virginia. I grew up with a Southern accent. I lost it as soon as I was able. I went to college in Virginia. I lived in Paris for 2 years, then came to Philadelphia, where I've been ever since, and I love it here. Best city, except for Paris. And it's great. I want to say before I go forward that I feel very, very honored to be showing with this group of artists, because I was just knocked out. It was great to be able to go into the other galleries last Saturday and look at everything, and just knocked me out. Great, I'm very pleased.
So you want to tell us a little bit about your current body of work here?
Sure, let's see. I'll start with the big piece, ataraxia, which means, I think it means a state of tranquility and calmness. And I started it in 2020 before the election, because I was freaking out and I didn't want to take Xanax. So I started working on this political piece, which has a collection of famous quotations and adages, some going back for 100 years or more. And it was an attempt by me to put into context all of the horror that I thought we were facing. And I was right, actually, because it came anyway with the big lie. But anyway, there are multiple quotes in there that I had a great time making visual by hammering fonts into 4-ply museum board, and otherwise making them decorative. So a lot of these quotations have to do with tyrants, and there's one even by Hitler, but it is really a picture of what we were going through back then, and we're still going through, there are various quotations that didn't make it into the big piece, and instead I just printed them up and framed them because I just didn't want to let them go. There's a favorite one by Anne Frank that I've always loved. There it is. I don't believe that the big men, the politicians and capitalists alone are guilty of the war. Oh no, the little man is just as guilty. And that is as true today as it ever was. In fact, a lot of these quotations that moved me, even ones from 100 or so years ago, could have been written that week. So there's also, if you pull back from the big piece, there's a dotted line drawing of the Statue of Liberty seen from below that is sort of faint. I didn't want it to jump out too much, but it just seems like it's, she's kind of fragile up there still. So the piece took months and months, and it worked. It kept me sane. It kept me calm up through the election and through January 6th. And so it did its job for me, which is good. And I don't know, people are probably familiar with a lot of these quotations. Some are famous and some aren't as famous, but they still, I think, carry weight. So
your other works have to do with the topic of home, correct?
Yes, the other 9 pieces, which are much lighter in flavor. I mean, they're not lighter. I'm looking at them, they look kind of dark from here, but they're not dark philosophically. And this all started when my husband and I moved out of our house, a 4-story townhouse in Center City, 4 flights of steps. And we moved 3 blocks away into a high rise, which is, you can see the beautiful sunset behind me. But the whole idea of home, we were there for decades, and all of a sudden, because we weren't even planning this, it just happened very, very quickly. We found ourselves getting our house ready for market, selling it, packing up, moving into a place that is so different. It feels like another planet, actually. So my husband's actually still adjusting. I've adjusted much better. But so what is home? The whole idea of home, a house. But there are many, many iterations of house. This is house of correction. So a house can actually be someplace that you don't actually want to be, and you had no say in getting there, and you have no say when you can get out. This one is Nissan Close, which is French for house of ill repute, which is a happy place for many people and a way to earn a living. And that one's particularly decorative. Let me see. Oh, this is a good one too. Haunted House, which is a little topsy-turvy and still gives a lot of us nightmares when we think of movies we saw as children. Then what else? There's oh yeah, these are the happy ones.
So Mer, can you talk about your technique here?
Yes. I use a 4-ply black museum board, which is thick enough to let me cut into it and peel away layers. The surface colors are a technique called sgraffito, where I layer wax and oil crayon, cover it with an oil pastel, like an iridescent oil pastel, and then I have various tools where I scratch through, which not only gives it interesting textures, but it changes the colors dramatically. In fact, every photographer who's ever shot my work, let's just say, they don't enjoy shooting my work, because depending on where you stand and how you tilt the light, all the colors can be radically different. This one is House of Cards, which is a metaphor for our state of mind for months. But there's also a lot of balsa wood, which I carve into, again, play with color for color and texture. And this is a teepee, which when I was doing research, a lot of Native Americans and a lot of other people live in teepees to this day. Some of them are quite large, but it's home. It is home to a lot of people. And this one is Doll's House, which, like most little girls, it was something absolutely thrilling to me growing up. And I spent many, many happy hours with my doll's house. And I think you can see there, you can see a lot of the textures. Some of these textures are actually hammered into the museum board. A lot of the pieces are carved out of balsa wood or 4-ply museum board. So, but, you know, again, it's all about what is home. It's a place where we keep our stuff. It's our refuge. Sometimes it's a place we can't wait to get out of in the morning. A lot of people I keep hearing have enjoyed working from home during the pandemic, but I'm hearing from other people that they miss terribly being able to leave the house and go to work somewhere. And that, I think, is on its way back. But home is, they say home is where the heart is. But it just took on a special meaning this year with the move.
This one's a little different.
This one is different because it was sort of a one-off, and I did it in the early 90s out of all kinds of little bits and pieces that I'd been saving from other work. So it's a little more abstract and is just a precursor to this series called Home. But it oddly enough is about the same size as the other one, which I didn't realize. But
it's a great show. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Next, we're heading into Susan D'Alessio's space. Hi, Susan.
Hi.
You want to tell us a little bit about yourself and then about the show?
Yeah, I've been working as a full-time painter since about 2006 when I started as a student and entered the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts, and did it part-time. So I was there for 6 years, and I wanted a change of life, and that's certainly what happened. I really it was like being in heaven for 6 years, really. And I really found out who I was as a painter. When I'd been in college, I'd taken some painting classes, and I'd always thought that I would end up being an old lady under a tree with a big hat painting landscapes. And that has been my vision for the last 60 years or so. And so I was surprised. By the time I'd gotten through the academy, I had met some teachers who looked at my collages and said that I should start taking them seriously. I had showed them to him because he said he would be interested in seeing these cards I'd made as birthday gifts or whatever to people and making little collages. And he said, you should start taking this seriously. And that just started me becoming an abstract painter, which is what I've always wanted to do and never knew that I could. So it's been a really exciting time for me. And I started in this collages. These particular ones that are showing now are from images of the January 6th. The January 6th, I'm not sure quite how to describe it.
That's all right.
Uprising, attack, whatever. And I had a hard time working this past year. It really was difficult. And I found that at the actual in-person opening at Cerulean, I talked to a lot of other artists who, many of them had the same problem. And these are artists that have been working as artists all their lives and suddenly found themselves paralyzed this past year and were not able to make anything. And I went through those periods, but this was one catharsis when I was so upset at the denial of the election results that I just started making these square pieces. They're small. They're only about, I think they're 4 inches in diameter or 4 inches across. But it was in the same way, like what Murr said, it kind of got out my anger and my energy. And it was just something I had to do. And I'm proud of them. I was a little nervous about displaying them just because I, always hate to get into politics or felt that I couldn't get into politics with my art, but I had started doing it with my jewelry. I was even making jewelry that was related to the 9/11 and to the attack on Baghdad. So, this is just an extension of that. These are also small pieces, like 4 inches by 4 inches. I worked at home a lot. I have a studio that's about an hour commute from my house. And it sounds shocking that it would be that long, but it's not. I enjoy the commute a lot. But during the COVID time, I was more nervous about going up to my studio. So I did a lot of work at home, just on the small table that you see behind me. And because the table's small and my space was small, I worked on small collages. And I set myself assignments. This was more in relief from the political stuff. I just kind of said, before the pandemic started or as it was starting, I went to the nearest art supply store and bought dozens of these panels in all different sizes. So I would not run out of material if I was going to be isolated. And so all of this was ready for me. And these were experiments to see what would happen if I put collage on top of the raw wood. So there's a raw wood, stained wood in the background of all of these. And this was playful and just, I wasn't serious about it and just really had fun. And it was a nice relief from all the stuff that was swirling around us at that time with in the early 2021 and just looking back at my work now and going I did the work that past year, I'm just kind of amazed and confused in some ways about what happened when, because I just, just kind of stunned by it all. This I did in my studio because I needed the larger space. The one on the left is a larger painting. It's, I think, 36 high and maybe 30 wide, something like that.
So Susan, you're using fabrics, yes?
Yeah, I'm working in fabric and collage using fabric. One of the people that's here with me right now or online is Fred Weinstein, and he gave me an enormous amount of fabric that had belonged to his wife, who died and who had been and was also a friend of mine and had been a quilt maker all her life. And she never threw anything away. So it was mounds and mounds of fabric. And at first I was reluctant to accept it all because I didn't know what I was going to do with it. And but I started working in smaller pieces. And then eventually, with the help of another artist who said he would take anything I didn't want, I went through and just took the pattern pieces, and which was what I was interested in, and gave him all the solid fabric that he's using for school children. So some of these are pretty large pieces of fabric, and it's all affixed to a canvas. It's I use matte medium, and I use it by the gallon.
Well, what's the fun of somebody else's? Well,
so this is was all a blue theme in the back. I get another assignment again, and a set of smaller collages that are. I also gave myself an assignment on these. I kind of pretend I'm a student in school, and my teacher's asking me to do one thing. And so I decided, well, I'll do one panel that's based on browns, another panel that's based on blue, another panel that's based on black. And it's a great way to get me started because I already have a focus and know where to go. I keep waiting to get tired of these fabrics, but I don't seem to be getting tired of them. I want to do more painting, and which I'm doing, but also end up with the fabrics again. Many of them were designed because they were designed for quilt fabrics. The pattern is very small, very subtle. And one of my teachers from the Academy, Jan Baltzell, came by during the reception, and you know, she said that the patterns remind her of certain periods of time, stages, and you know, in her life and my life. I mean, because we're about the same age, and it's true. Sometimes you can look at a pattern and say, "Oh my God, my grandmother used to wear that kind of pattern," you know, or my mother wore that suit that had that same pattern in it. So there's a lot of associations when you start looking at the fabrics. The piece on the white, on the left is it's 48 high by 36 wide, and I was going to do several of those, and ended up just doing this one, and I think I will continue to do more. I just covered the whole canvas with red fabrics, just not even thinking about what was going to go with what. I didn't stop to think. I just pasted stuff on. And then for some reason started putting the chartreuse screens on, and it's wild and crazy. And I know people have come to my studio and hated it, and I don't hate it. I just think it's weird, and I do like it. It was very freeing to do this. When I first started studying art seriously, it was during the era where everybody was worshiping abstract expressionism, you know, Jackson Pollock and de Kooning. And so that's still very much a part of who I am deep down, thinking about those painters. Lee Krasner's Pollock's wife, did a lot of collage. At the time, the abstract expressionists were a pretty macho group, and so they wouldn't have had too much room for women, but I'm glad Lee Krasner held her own. At least after her husband died, she was able to start producing a lot, and oftentimes collages, tearing up things that he had made and using his drawings after he died to make collages. Yeah. I was fascinated with the things that were in the newspaper. During the beginning of the COVID, none of us knew what was going on. And I looked at the paper every single day, looked at the headlines, looked at the magnificent photographs. We have some very, very talented photojournalists at the Inquirer, and they come up with some amazing photographs. And I was fascinated by them, started wanting to use them, and just really tore them in half oftentimes and glued them as they were, and then made notation, sometimes on the front. And I always made notations on the back of what the day was. And it's just, you know, some of all these come from almost 1 month at the beginning, in March, April, May of 2021, when none of us knew what was going on. Nobody was going into stores. There were all these empty spaces. It's a line of trucks in Germany lined up waiting to get over the border. I was going to add paint to them. I had them on the wall in my studio for a long time, and I thought I was going to add paint to them. And then I thought, you know, they're just fine the way they are. When I was in undergraduate school, I had a teacher who taught watercolor, and she said it took two people to paint a watercolor, one to paint it and another one to tell them when to stop. And so I've always kind of used that as a guide, because sometimes we want to keep on painting, but the work is really telling us, stop already, we've had enough. These were also from the beginning of the pandemic. The New York Times published a whole list of 100,000 people that had died of COVID up to that point. This was May 23rd of 2020, I believe. 21. And I was so struck by what they had done. They had had the courage to take, I think, probably at least 4, maybe 5 whole pages devoted to just listing the names of all the people that had died. And they had their names, their ages, the town they were from, and a little, maybe a couple sentences, a short little phrase about what they had done, something in their life that was special. And so they would say, she sang in the church choir, or she always helped her neighbor train their dogs, or he loved to work on his boat, whatever. And it just made them real people. And so that's what's in the background. The top shapes are stencils from boxes that I opened up so that their silhouette is the open part of the box to add another depth to the painting. And then on top, it's the construction cranes. I've been fascinated with construction cranes for quite a while now, and I still am fascinated with them. And it seems like we have more and more of them, especially in Center City. There's a lot of building going on in Center City. And this has been going on for the last year, and you would never guess that people were dying, and that in many ways, our government and we decided that the economy was more important than people's lives. So that's what these paintings say. Yeah, I'm trying to say. $100,000 seems rather quaint right now. It's hard to believe that at one point that was a lot of people. Now it's what, almost 1 million. I did want to mention about Burr. Burr was shows right across the hall from me there at the exhibit, and it was so gratifying to have somebody else that was really basing a lot of their work on what was happening right then, as far as what was happening in the world. You know, artists go 2 different ways. Sometimes we want to escape, and other times we want to jump in with what's happening. And I kind of alternated between jumping in and escaping.
Thank you, Susan.
I just want to thank everybody that came, all my buddies and friends and support system that showed, including our daughter from Mexico.
That's great. It's a wonderful show.
Thank you.
Great. So next up is Alysa Bennett. Hi, Alysa. Oh, you're muted. You could unmute. There you go.
Now I'm unmuted. Well, unlike Susan, this work is not political because I think I wanted to escape. But just before I tell you more about me, a lot of what I had to put in the show was very older work, because I was also sort of just stymied by what was going on around, and it's just like the muse got up and walked away one day, and I still was working, but it wasn't going well. Anyway, let's see. The show is all horses, which I've done before. the horses come from my childhood on a ranch in California, and then part of my childhood, and then I was very affected by working on a ranch in Arizona with my father. So the horse imagery just really moves me, I guess. Love them. One of the things that's difficult about using a horse is that it's very hard to make it sort of not, what do I say, overly sentimental, kitschy, things. You just try to find a new way to talk about them. This little guy I started years ago doing the straw, which you'll see one of those, and then sort of went into these feathered horses, which I enjoy using like something from one creature to describe another. And I really enjoyed working with the feathers, and I've done many, many, many horses with the feathers. This is the first time I've done sort of really small ones. I just, I like to see some energy and some movement in them. Something that I recognize from, being around them a lot, I guess. This is a photograph I took in Arizona at the ranch, just because I was just taking photographs, and this one horse appeared to be standing on the back of the other, but also the other horse, the one in the foreground, also I thought was mimicking the shapes of many of the hills. And I like, in all my work, I've enjoyed, bringing together the shapes of nature in different ways, which they all seem very attached to each other. And anyway, there's another one of those too. Let's see, this is the first time I've tried an installation. If you move back a little bit, you can see that there's a straw horse at the bottom from my work a long time ago. But then I had him in my studio, and I had that branch up there just because I loved it. I thought it was beautiful. And then I thought, well, maybe I can revive him a little. He was getting a little kind of shabby. And so I put him under the tree, and then I added some of my stick birds, which I've made before for other pieces. Other horses have had stick birds in them, but so I like recreating creatures with different materials. It's all natural materials, I guess, is one of the things that holds them together. Anyway, it's an old lilac bush. But the nest was, they made the nest. A bird made the nest. And then, oh boy, so many different things. Then I have also shown before, but in this show also, these horses that are made, covered with letters that were written from my grandmother to her mother and father. And I had stacks of them, and I just loved looking at them and not trying to read them all because it'd be impossible, but also just looking at the beautiful hand that created them. And, and then the history of, when you look at the stamps, and, a stamp from Cairo, a 2-cent stamp from the United States. And I don't know. And it was just I didn't think I was a collager, but I think that they are, in fact, a collage of these letters. And it was really fun for me to work with the letters and the letter heads. Those, in the old fashioned, when you went to a hotel, they gave you stationery with letter heads on it, so it can kind of give you, but they help me make the collage. And then there's the bird, of course. I love birds, and birds love to sit on horses. That's a quite imaginary bird, obviously, but at the ranch that you could go out in you know, you just see the horses out and there'd be like 4 or 5 birds sitting on their backs trying to find, you know, a perfect perch for their hunting or whatever. This is the other photograph that goes with the first one, my old friend Ahab. But I just liked the textures, you know, the texture of the, what am I trying to say? The corral, the texture of his hair and his mane, and then just being able to see in the distance to what was out there, which was just nonstop distance, which was very compelling for me also. And then, these are two older pieces, that one, and then there's another one coming, which was just kind of a, you know, another response to being around horses. This is the only one I have in there with a rider on it, a man in a hat. I don't know. I have a lot of work that was sort of big charcoal drawings with sort of crazy lines in them of horses. So these were paintings in response to the drawings, actually. Trying to move one idea to the other. Again, both the man's gesture and the horse's gesture that I'm after. There's another little small horse. These are made with the macaw feathers. I have a dealer in Florida who gives me the macaw feathers of his macaws and they're all naturally molted feathers, cruelty free, as they say. And I like the small legs, the stick legs is something that I've been working with for a long time. Natural, trying to use a stick with a natural turn in it, you know, where sticks turn to convey the leg. Because I think horses they're such huge, strong animals, and they have these very delicate, long legs. So that's kind of in response to that. And then this is the other horse with, once again, the beautiful handwriting of when people wrote so magnificently. So their hands were so beautiful. Here it says, "Dear Maud." My cousins who are on here will know who that is. July 2nd, 1917. It's just, they held me while I was doing it. I just really loved that. And then to add the element of the rain, you know, kind of just draped over the horse, sort of casually in this sense. And then the other, this young boy and a horse in the field. I don't know. It's the companion to the man on the horse. So he's not a rider, but he's the figure with the horse. And you're coming right in on that horsey. And you know, like, you would never know it, but these horses are actually very individual to me. They're more universal when you look at them and you don't know that. But for me, they are almost portraits of horses that I knew well.
Alisa, do you still have any horses?
No, not anymore. We had to sell the ranch a couple of years ago. I wasn't able to continue. My father gave me the ranch and I ran it for quite a while, not quite a while, but a long time. And then my wonderful manager had to retire. And so I thought maybe it was time to come home and spend more time with my kids and my grandkids. But I miss it terribly, just terribly. It was quite an experience for me. This piece is called Loose Rein, and he's another, obviously one of the letter horses. And I just named him that because, you know, every once in a while, one of these babies would sort of get away and just start running. And so I used to, you know, just like the horse is going full bent over the landscape. But then also covered the letters. And the other, I guess the other connection of letters and horses is, of course, the Pony Express. The letters were carried by horses. Not too long before my grandmother wrote these letters. It was a very short thing that happened in history, but it was pretty dramatic what they did. So they were conveyors of letters, as the birds were, of course. And and this is what I was talking about when I said my drawings, of which I've had many of these drawings where I did horses. This happens to be an old mule named Erasmus, who I rode for a while at my neighbor's place. And I just loved his rough mane and his big old nose and huge ears, and tried to bring the grass together with his mane, I guess. And those little dots across the top are just magnets, so that they're not part of the drawing. They hold it up. And this is a horse who's also related to those other two paintings, but more inspired by Rosa Bonheur and her wonderful, huge, magnificent painting called The Horse Fair. And it's, you know, the horse in being held back, being scared by the human, where the other two, the humans are quite kindly and with the horse. So this human arm is trying to control. And when you do that, you can't ever control, because you can't, their fear is too much. So I was trying to get some of that into this painting.
Alisa, can you speak a bit about how you approach color and brushwork in your painting?
Oh, I don't know. Color, I like that when one color is defined by lots of different colors coming together, so that there's, yeah, so sort of the gray of his cheek is, you know, the purple, white, and blues and greens, and it's just just coming together. It's knowing when to stop, as Susan always said, you know, because sometimes you just sort of overdo the whole thing and it just dies. But I was trying to get the energy in there, and so by using the different colors to define movement and then the space. So that this painting is actually a newer version of one that was older, and I decided to put him back up and see where we could go, because I left him unfinished for a long time. So this was a nice opportunity to get him going again.
So Lisa, we have another question. Are you using photography as reference for your work?
Yeah, in some respects, yes. Mostly for anatomical questions. You know, sometimes I'll come up and I just won't be able to see what the ear looks like when it's turned backwards, you know, and I don't want to get it wrong, you know, because that you can make a lot of extensions on how you define the horse, but I just don't like it if it's anatomically incorrect. It doesn't matter if it's exaggerated or not, but so that's really about it, though. I other than that, these are the poses are from memory, and just because I love, you know, I just saw these horses in every possible pose, and I find it very compelling. The horses' poses are Yeah, their gestures are the same as ours. You can read them very easily. So as far as color, I don't know. I just sort of pick things up and see where they go, I guess. Same with the drawings. I just start sort of squiggling around on the paper, and then it squiggles itself into a form, as that did.
Thank you, Lisa. It's a great show. Fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you to my friends that have all come. I really appreciate it so much. It's good to see you.
So next we're heading to Louise Vanuezes' show. Hello, Louise.
Hi, Mike. Hi, Tina.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and then about your work on the show?
Yes, I'm Louise Vanuezes. I live in Bertrandville, which is a very small village in Chester Springs, about an hour and a half west of Philadelphia. This is my first solo show at Cerulean. Actually, my first solo show ever. So thank you, Mike and Tina. This group of paintings, I can't think of a way to describe them in a group. They're kind of what I had, but sometimes after I've worked on some paintings, I'll figure out what they were about. So I could talk about this one. Actually, this is a good one to talk about the way I paint. This is an older painting. And when I say older, it's probably like 8 years. I didn't start painting until about 12 years ago. I went to the academy when I turned 50. I had been an art teacher for 25 years. So this is an imaginary landscape that was sitting in my studio, and I painted that white deer right before Christmas this year. And that's kind of how I work. Like sometimes I don't know what to do with it until I do. And then sometimes it works. A lot of times it doesn't. And this is another older painting. This is a pretty large painting. It started off as a study in a figure drawing painting at the Academy. I don't know if anybody knows who Josh Marsh is, but that is Josh Marsh. He was the teacher, and the model didn't come that day. So he posed for us, sat in a chair, and I think we were supposed to create, I don't know, some kind of imaginary background. And I was just a bad painting and sitting in my studio, but I kept it because of the canvas was large. And again, like, I don't know, a couple years later, I was looking at it, and I had a Luna moth. I had bought one at an antique store. I'm like fascinated by the moon, really, and night. And I just painted the figure into a Luna moth. Just kind of painted over the background. Okay, this is a strange painting, and I would like to be able to give it an explanation, but it really is so personal that if I talk about it too much, it's going to, I think, define it in a way I'd rather not. But there are 4 paintings that I painted at the same time. There are 4 10 by 10 paintings. This actually started off as a painting of flowers that really was not working. I think I might have turned it upside down, and then it had a lot of color on it. And the beauty of a painting that is failing so tremendously like that is that you have nothing, I have nothing invested in it at that point. So I can really take a lot of chances. And at one point, well, it became a church, but then there was a lot of snow. And then I painted that out. And that last gesture of what looks sort of like an aurora borealis, I don't know. I don't know, except when you see the other four, they were all painted around the time when my mother passed. This painting, this one was the jury's out on this one for me. I finished this right before Christmas, like right a couple months ago, even though I worked on it a long time. And this is a painting of a horse that lives near a farm that stands in front of that white barn. And I passed it on my way to the library. And I just love living around farms. And I painted it pretty realistically. And it was very unsatisfying. And I just kept painting on it and trying to figure out what it is that the farm represents for me. It's I don't really know. It's nostalgic and probably just a simpler time. And that blotch of blue paint on the grass was an accident, but I sometimes leave those if I think it adds.
So Louise, are you approaching these like fairly directly? Or do you plan them like?
And very much not planned. They're very much I read something today of Frank Auerbach book. He was talking about poems. Something about like a good poem is like ice melting on a stove, like writing that melt. And that's kind of what I feel like I'm doing, is I'm just allowing the painting to happen. I'm reacting to the marks I'm making, and it changes dramatically all the time. So this one is also around similar to, or painted at the same time as the one with the flash. And I have those little vases. The one on the left is actually black, and it's in another painting in this group. And when I put the white paint on, and I don't remember why, but it created like this female form, which makes the one on the right look like a male form, and then that little one on the far right. And I think I had kind of, I just bought a book of, not Bernard, Foley art that I absolutely fell in love with. And I think I was influenced by that. And this is the third of the ones painted around the time that my mom passed. And it's called Fake Flowers. And strangely, my mother was a big gardener. And but when she got old, she had to settle for what she hoped were, realistic fake flowers. And I didn't really want too much of hers, but I took this, and yeah, it was a pretty straightforward still life. And then I painted it black. And then I painted, the object on the left was a peach, and the object on the right was a figure, like a little figure. And those paintings that I painted at that time, the color yellow is like a character in them. And this one was actually the first. So this was from a bouquet of daffodils, and I don't know. I wasn't interested in it when I painted it. That face on the vase was completely accidental. I painted the whole background black again, and then it became a night scene. The bunnies live in my studio. They're little candy containers. They show up frequently. So these are a combination. The pink one is an older painting. There's the peach. It's just a little, I don't know. I don't know what it's made out of. I just love the color of it. I have a lot of like antique vases. I have a lot of antiques, little things in my studio. And I do have a big flower garden, and those daffodils are from my garden. This is another painting that I lived in this one for a long time, and for me, it's a memory of, I lived in New Orleans when I was 20. I was a student, and I really loved that city. And I had a red couch from like the Salvation Army, and I had a roommate named LaRue. And one time I went into her room, and she had put lipstick on and kissed the mirror and written herself a little love note. I think it says, "You're beautiful, LaRue." And it's not so much a memory of New Orleans, it's a memory of being that age and just, I don't know, just being in awe of living in that city. And the horse is just a little chalk horse, an antique. And I think it represents like a witness, like saying, I was there. That did happen. This is a pretty recent painting. This is of the wall in my studio. Those two kind of darker rectangular things at the top are the skylights. And that horizontal painting is in the show, but I couldn't kind of recreate it. It just ended up being the ocean. And I actually painted very realistic bouquet, and it really, again, was so, I don't know. So I painted over it, and you can see, because the thick paint was the flower underneath, and then the flowers on top are just imaginary and kind of imaginary wallpaper. And so I think the idea is that, you can be in a place, and that is my studio. There is no wallpaper, but it's in my head. So, it's kind of existing in two places. This painting is called Strange Weather We Had. It was originally called Strange Weather We're Having. And it originally had like bright green and yellow sky and red clouds with angry faces. And the ship was always there. And, if the question is, when are you done? I think it, for me, is when I can look at a painting and and it doesn't make me want to like scratch myself.
So Louise, what are your thoughts about the paint itself? Because the surfaces you create are quite wonderful.
Yeah, I paint over because there's so many layers are mistakes. You know, I think, oh, I'll try this color, and you put it on, and you're like, well, no, that's no. So then you paint over it. And this is another one that's very recent. This one is called Not Lost, Not Yet Found. And I finished this again right before Christmas. And 2 days later, my husband and I drove up to Maine and we bought a house. And I know that, I guess if there's a theme to all the recent paintings, it is about the ocean. And I have wanted to live near the ocean my whole life. There was a British flag underneath in the front and an American one in the back. My husband's British, but I don't know. I painted them out. And there's like a little whirlwind following it, which, I don't know, you know, the things you want to leave behind. This is a painting of my spare bedroom where I've tried to meditate many times and can't do it. I can't do it, but the painting sometimes is really meditative. So I'll have to be satisfied with that. And strangely, there's like a world that bed is sitting on. It's like the earth, which honestly, it's those things that happen that completely unplanned is what gets me back in the studio the next day. Yeah, this one came from a conversation I had with a good friend when we were talking about joy and how we didn't have it and how do you get it, and all the different ways, all the millions of books out there that tell you how to do it. And the idea of like wrestling it to the ground is what this painting is about. And you know, that painted the rainbow and then the cloud comes and covers it, and then I paint it again, and it's fragile. Yeah, and I like the way Tina put these together because I never had these sort of together, and they kind of interest me seeing them. The one in the middle is the one that I was trying to paint in that studio painting. And this is probably the least painted on painting. There's a pond near where I live, and I just love it. And I came back from a walk and painted this one time with this beautiful paint. It's Old Holland's, I don't know, some dark blue. It's like a very inky color. And I didn't put a lot of other paint on here. And I took this to a critique with Ying Li, and I was telling her how I really wanted to include figures in my work. And she said, well, that is a figure. And I've never been able to look at this painting without seeing that brushstroke on the pond as being a reclined figure. This one's just silly. I don't know what this is. I mean, it's just a basket with some shapes and reminded me of lungs. And this one is, I don't know.
I like that you don't know a lot.
I mean, this is a little personal. Yeah, hooked too. What I liked about the actual painting of this one was, and this happens frequently, like at the end of a painting session, if I have like a loaded brush, with an expensive color, and I have a blank canvas, I'll just start painting. And this was red, this beautiful red. And I just painted this so simply, and I can still almost never get back to that unself-conscious thing you do when you don't think it's for keeps. And anyway, I loved that it was red. It reminded me of that kind of fabric, toile, something like. And I love to experiment with. I don't have like a palette. I kind of just try things out. A lot of experiment with transparent white that I hope doesn't take off a couple of years of my life. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise. It's a fantastic show. All right, we're going to head down the aisle and just visit Liz Price and her exhibition. Hello, Liz.
I unmuted. Hi. I can't believe I have to go last. This is awful.
The closer.
That was really pretty mind-blowing. I think everybody might agree. Everybody, hearing everybody talk about their work. And the other thing that really struck me was how Tina, speaking of zooming in, zooms right in, and it's such a deep dive into looking. So I'm frankly exhausted. I hope I can say something about my work. I am originally from Louisville, Kentucky. I came to Philadelphia to get a master's degree at Penn, study with Neil Welver and a bunch of other accomplished artists. That was a long time ago. I'm still working out a lot of those bugs. So I think this is my 4th show at Cerulean, and I'm grateful for that opportunity. I'm always just blown away by just how beautifully Tina and Mike install the work, and these juxtapositions like this one. This is a charcoal drawing. Frankly, I was miserable when I did this drawing. I was like, what am I doing? It's like Louise said, I don't know. I never know. I have no idea what the hell I'm doing. And so I did this in 2020, and I actually had a show at Cerulean subsequent to that, and that drawing was not in it. And then this painting is a little painting that I did this fall, like end of October, probably. It's probably the last painting I did for this show. And on the inside of the gallery, we'll see the other paintings that were around the same thing. And it's, I always like to have a visual reference. I paint from something. I don't know what abstract or representational mean anymore. I know I'm not particularly interested in a realistic representation. I just need something that's not in my head to get me painting. I'm still giggling about like the beginning of the sequence of artists, because I think about politics, I think about mental health, I think about everything all the time. And it's so overwhelming to me that I guess ultimately I'm an escapist in my work, because I am sort of defiantly seeking joy. And, color's pretty much what does it for me. So I don't know how it all happens and why some of them work and some of them don't, and why, like, for instance, this painting that is very simple. You know, I love gesture, and I don't know, you don't know what's going to happen when you put stuff down. And, you know, I get stuck by the subject matter because there is this whole thing about representation, but I'm sorry, you can hear my dogs upstairs. They can hear me. I don't know if you can hear them, but they can hear me, and they've suddenly started barking. They were silent the whole time, but now that I'm unmuted, they're barking. But so let's see. So I set up stuff. I have these different things in my studio, and I love to garden. So I bring in things from the garden, or, you know, if I really just need something alive, I'll just pick up some flowers and bring them in. That particular charcoal drawing was included in the last show, and that show was almost everything in it was 22 by 30 inches. I decided to do these charcoal drawings just to see how that would affect my painting and the mark making. And this whole idea of representation and non-representation, because there's something very liberating about just drawing and tonalities. So that was after we have a community garden, and it was flooded, and I went and just cut all the flowers that were above where the flood had hit. So this is called After the Flood. I really struggle with titles and subject matter. I think it's ironic that I'm following Louise, because there's like such beautiful symbolism in her work, and I just keep doing it. Every now and then something has some meaning that I can identify. These two little paintings are the ones that I did sort of during the same painting session as that one that was on the outside. There's that barking dog. That's Piper, corgi on the left. And again, she's not really the subject. She's just part of the visual field. You know, and just messing around with the paint and the color and just seeing what will make it kind of sing. And then the abstract one that was the first one Tina was showing. I was still on this deck, but I turned around the other way, and there are like these railings and bushes, and there's just a lot of visual information. So sometimes I just use up the palette that way. And sometimes those paintings are the best because they are the most spontaneous, and you know, like we have mentioned before, you have nothing to lose. In this drawing, I think that is the last thing I did for this show. I have this scarf my friend Danielle gave me years and years ago, and it turned up in a painting like, I don't know, 10 years ago. It's a little painting with just this sort of setup in the middle, and the scarf is tiny, but I mean, it's funny because in my mind it's huge, but when I look at that painting, a friend of mine bought that painting, and I look at it and the scarf is just tiny. So it's just these little blobs of color, but that kind of started me on this. I think of it as my Rosetta Stone for color mixing. So, you know, the scarf is woven, and if I'm like ever stuck for color, I just look into it, and there's, you know, the warp threads and the weft, and, you know, mixing color is always incredible. It's never, you never add what you think you need to add. And, you know, this is kind of the heart of what I'm interested in. And so I've been painting that scarf for a long time. And so that drawing represented just, I just thought, well, let me draw it and see what happens with that. So, you know, there's the subject, but it's really, you know, and I do struggle with that, but it's really about these marks and these shapes and these funny little gestures, these pieces of light and shadow that play across that fabric. but I'm very interested, you know, I mean, it's formalism, really. It's composition and form and shape and light. And then it's also none of that, because sometimes you just let her rip, and I don't know.
Liz, are there other artists that you think about?
Well, you know, I've been looking at art my entire life. My mother was a sculptor, and so she was always really great at, you know, it wasn't really like being dragged to a museum. We just were always looking at things. And, you know, the obvious references are Matisse and Soutine. I went to the Barnes the other day, and, you know, one of the great things about coming out of the pandemic, maybe it's a great thing about the pandemic, is that we were all cut off from human interaction and culture. And now we realize how important it was. But I looked at this Soutine painting there, and it had these orange flowers, like these oranges and greens. And the influence there was pretty intense. And, you know, Matisse, I've been thinking a lot about those paintings that I've done with the blue stripes. And actually, there's something about the blue stripes that was like the first thing that's finally been able to pull me away from this color block scarf. And I think it's visual reference to other painters. Tissot did a lot of, you know, these French women in blue and white stripes, and awnings that would be blue and white stripes. And Matisse, there was one at the Barnes that it's not a fabric, but it's like the shadow from this shutter, and, you know, different shades of blue. And there's just something very, you know, not compelling, but it resonates visually. Who else? Everybody. And everybody I don't, you know, when we talk about political work, I remember looking at Leon Golub's paintings. He taught at Rutgers for many years, and I was living in New York, and I went out to see an incredible show of his work. And they're just huge, you know, kind of almost like theater sets of these tortured figures, you know? So I don't know, I mean, none of that, you would never see that in my work, but it's certainly in my psyche. And then, you know, color, Albers.
I have a question. Are your black and white work, your drawing, did they influence your painting, or vice versa?
Well, I hoped they did, but that remains to be seen. Painting is a lot easier because you just blob it in. I mean, at least I do. And it's faster, and I like to work quickly. I paint mostly on panels because it's a smoother, faster surface. But drawings are appealing because if you don't have a lot of time to set up and mix a lot of color, you can just, you know, see what happens. And here's another one that I wasn't sure that was a painting, but, you know, you just never know, do you? And it's so mind-blowing to be able to zoom in like that. I mean, I don't even look at this, you know, I've never seen it so closely as right now. It's incredible.
There's no escape here.
It's pretty good. I like the color. But the drawing to the right of this little painting, I think, has a fluidity that, you know, I didn't see that in the studio. I didn't see it until you all installed the show, that it kind of speaks to the painting. You know, it's always the way in art that what you think is going to happen is not what happens. So I thought, if I do all these charcoal drawings, you know, this mark making, it will change my brush work. I will do this, I will do that. And, you know, I don't know whether that's true or not. You do, you know, when you're drawing, you have to explore a variety of mark making, just trying to get it down. So I don't really know the answer. Remains to be seen. And then a neighbor of mine had this kind of cool little bird cage she put out, and she has a lot of cool stuff. And I thought, well, she probably really struggled with getting rid of this. I picked it up and I just love it. It's, but you know, like that painting, I just thought it was terrible. Because it's, you know, it's just, it's never within your reach, you know, you can't ever really attain the representation. And then, so ultimately, you know, the painting is just kind of a relic of a process of searching and looking and searching and trying and then letting it go.
Thank you, Liz.
Well, thank you all.
Thank you again for coming. Thank you to all the artists. And the show is up through March 6th. Hope you can check it out. If you can't come down, you can see it on the website. And I hope you all have a great night.